We're on a bit of a tight schedule. We do have a presentation by our luncheon sponsor I'd like you to give your attention to. We have a kind of tight schedule on the afternoon activities. They basically have to leave at 2. John will tell you, if you don't know already, where they're meeting. So we want to get going and get you out for a great afternoon. Today we're going to be hearing from Frank Riva. He's the General Manager of Consumer Goods for a new sponsor to us, Signals Analytics. We're delighted they're with us, and give your attention to Frank.
Good afternoon. And we look at it in a similar way. We call it something a little bit different. We call it the empowered consumer. And, I don't think there's anything here that's going to really, be a surprise or shock to anyone. But without question, the dependence we have on our devices today, from tablets to our phones to our computers, more and more brands have to be aware that, the engagement is 24/7 now. The front door is always open if you're a retailer, or if you're a consumer products company. You're having to sell now. You're having to act like a retailer, and you have to think much more broadly than maybe you did in the past. And I think the really important thing when we look at this slide here is this notion of the voice of the customer is everywhere. And customers are interacting with your brand without your knowledge. And it's happening. Discussions are taking place every single day, probably every minute, where in some way they're talking about your brand, your product, or your service. The question is do you really have an idea of not only what's being said, but why they're saying it? So in 2016, the world's top 500 consumer brands spent somewhere around $800 billion either extending their product line, developing new products, commercializing and marketing them. At the same time, 80% experienced a decline in market share. So in spite of all that investment, all that focus, all that effort, you're still seeing a struggle to stay relevant and maintain that market share. Global brands clearly need a faster, more effective way and less expensive way to make these data-driven marketing decisions. And I think this is a really important point. We all know all we talk about is how everything's going digital. More and more is being used from a mobile perspective. The rate at which data is growing online is clearly outpacing the ability of any company, and I would stress any company out there, to try to manage and keep up with it, whether it's manpower, whether it's the expertise from a data science perspective. That data growth is not going to stop, and the need to keep up with it is not going to stop either. And where Signals operates is really looking at the external marketplace data. We're not a Watson, we're not a Palantir. We don't come in to look to clean up the internal data within the four walls of a given company or brand. What we really focus on and where our expertise is that external marketplace data outside of your four walls. And the reality is right now the majority of that data is noise. It's nothing but noise, and the real question is how do you take something that's unconstructed, unstructured, lacks meaning, and actually start to apply something that does have meaning to it. And I think we all know, you hear big data, you hear analytics, you hear insights. You ask 10 people their definition and you're going to get 10 different answers most likely. But the reality is this is still a challenge. That external marketplace data is still something that people are trying to get a handle on. And there's no one company, and then I would even put ourselves in it, that currently has the magic wand or the potion for it. But what we do think is that we're heading down a very interesting direction, and we're seeing results with our customers. And this is really coming up with not just data, but creating insights that actually can drive better marketing performance. So what we're seeing is kind of this notion of a new standard, where you're tapping into this unstructured and unconnected data. And I think the key word here for us is this notion of unconnected. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but taking things out there from different data sources and providing connectivity that maybe you didn't even think had any applicability to each other. And to really help drive better customer engagement strategies with a higher probability of success and lowering the risk when you make those decisions. So real quickly, we just want to give you a little bit of an overview of the Signals platform. And the circles on the left there represent all the different types of data sources that we tap in today. And that would include some things that probably there is some familiarity in the room, around social listening, social monitoring. That certainly is a very key component of what we do, but we wrap a lot more around that. And I obviously won't go into the details on every single one, but just to give a little background, we're about a 6-year-old company. The roots started, we were started in Israel. There were people that were from military intelligence and created extremely robust platforms for what they were doing on the military side. And then obviously decision was made, there's a lot of things we can do here from a commercial application, and that created the birth of Signals. When we look at not only tapping into the data sets, but what we do with it, we leverage 3 key pieces with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. And we look at this at a high level of what we do with the data from 4 pieces. The first one is monitoring. First, we're obviously our name is Signals, looking to detect something, and that's the second step. We're listening, but what's really important is detecting something that actually matters and saying, wait a minute, something's happening here that we need to take a closer look at. The third component is to interpret and say, okay, we think something's happening here, but let's apply a little more rigor to it and find out what's going on. And then if we confirm that, yes, this is something that matters, then what we do is look to really create insights that can be acted upon. We are not a decision engine per se. What we like to say is that we help drive strategic decision making. And that's really our focus, is not to tell you what to do, but to provide that data that gives you that confidence and the ability to do things hopefully quicker and with less risk. So there's lots of different areas Signals plays in within consumer companies. If we put marketing aside for 1 second, we do a lot of work with innovation and R&D. We do a lot of work with corporate M&A, competitive intelligence. What we wanted to do here, though, is map this a little bit more closely to hopefully things that are more relevant to the group that's here and thinking about that consumer purchase path. And different areas along that path where Signals can help you with. So if we start on the left here with the notion of first you start to consider a product. looking at preconceived beliefs and notions about your brand, looking at really, the different areas, the voice of the consumers, key opinion leaders, what's being said out there about your brand. Moving into things like purchasing intent and propensity to buy, and looking at social media reviews and blogs, and continuing on. And I think one that's really important here is this notion of detecting excitement or potentially negative issues. I think if you look at where we are today, the reputation of a brand has the ability to change faster than ever. And if something catches fire, and whether it's a product recall or suddenly someone's maybe getting sick from something, the notion of being able to catch a problem faster, or ideally getting ahead of the problem, is really a key thing here. And that's a big part of what we're working on with our existing customers and prospects today. But it really is for each of these areas, even to the point where even if you've made the sale, you have a customer, how do you continue to monitor things like potential competitive switching or substitute products and alternatives? Or is there a new micro brand out there? Is there a new category developing that is adjacent to you and you need to be part of that, but you really thought you didn't have to worry about it right now? Those are the types of things we're looking at. And one thing I should go back to is obviously the notion of marketing effectiveness and efficiency, and how do you continue to manage that and improve it and make it better? So, just to kind of try to bring this together, I think you could take these different components and you could look at it in two ways. You can look at these different kind of pieces of the pie, if you will, as just what marketing's responsible for. But we also like to look at this as there's different parts of the organization outside just the marketing group that care about this as well. So we're really looking to do a couple things here. The first one is how do we start to take all that noise we talked about earlier, and how do we start to create something that actually makes sense? And it's insight that can now be shared both within a marketing group, within respective marketing teams, and how do people outside of marketing within the organization, how can the group start using it as a touch point to work together? And ultimately, it's tying those pieces together. And obviously, the ultimate goal is, from a marketing perspective, is to say, hey, how do we create these loyal, passionate, dedicated customers that are not going to leave us? I could talk about some different, examples we have here. But I think what I want to do is just pivot for 1 second real quick. We heard from Ms. Main earlier today, and it talked about their notion of seeing the idea of taking performance fabric and converting it into something that could be worn for business wear. And I think what came out of that was a very interesting example that we've actually been a part of. And when we talk about connecting what may be on the surface doesn't make sense, is this notion of athleisure is probably the hottest topic within apparel today. And how are those being leveraged, and how do you create new segments and new lines leveraging this new kind of performance type of material? And you would, when you look at it on the surface, you think, okay, well, if I'm an apparel manufacturer, if I'm in that space, obviously data around that might make sense. But what does it matter to, example, say, for a leading consumer goods company? Athleisure. I sell stuff. I sell crackers and soap and different things. Why do I care about athleisure? Well, one of the things we've worked on is what are people saying? Because you heard from Ms. Main earlier that, okay, you don't have to go to the dry cleaners now. This is easy enough. You throw it in the wash. You do it yourself. Well, for example, are the detergents good enough? Are they right? Are they fading the colors? It's one thing if you're wearing shorts and a t-shirt to the gym and you don't really care if, okay, maybe the smell doesn't get out completely, maybe I've got to fade. But what happens when you're starting to wear this in a business context? And suddenly you're in a business meeting, you don't want to wear a faded black shirt. or you don't want, stains under the arms or something like that. So we've done things where we start to look at what are people saying, what is working, what's not working from a detergent perspective, and what do they have to do. And if they could get a jump on what the market is saying, now you could start marketing to those people that you know are wearing this and say, hey, your old detergent isn't going to cut it anymore. Now you need to be doing this. We have this new formula that is specific to this notion of athleisure wear and performance-based materials. Those are the types of things that we're doing. And when we talk about connecting the unconnected, that's the type of things we want to do is reach further out and bring those things in that we know are most likely pertinent to what you're doing, but that, on the surface of things you may not even be thinking about. Just to wrap up, we've done a variety of work over our 6 years. We've done a lot of work with some very major consumer companies. And like I said, what we're really looking for here is we've done work on marketing effectiveness. We've done a lot of work on different campaigns and things of that. But we think there's a much broader application here. And for us, we're really looking forward to engaging with you further. Would love to answer more questions over the next couple days. Would love to hear feedback from you. We're certainly hearing both from the ad agency side and from the brand side how they know they have to go deeper into this, how they need to be more on the front end of this from a messaging perspective. So we would love to have that conversation with you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Frank, thanks so much. Frank, you're a solo here, is that correct? Okay, so he's your solo signals analytics voice. So if you have any questions about what you saw here today, grab him. You'll be at cocktails and dinner tonight
I
as
will.
well?
Yep.
Okay, what are you doing for your afternoon activity? Don't say work.
I won't say it.
Okay, don't say. All right, well done. Well done. Well played, sir. So thank you. Big hand for Frank again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to this afternoon activities. As Ken mentioned, we're on a little bit of a tight schedule, so I'll get you out of here quickly. Basically, if you're on the wine tour, that's going to be leaving at 2 p.m. at the front of the hotel, so where you walked in to check in. So be there at 1:55 if you can, because it will leave pretty sharp at